The streams of the Pohore Hills have been operating saws and blacksmith workshops for centuries. Such a role had also the Bistrica Brook, where now the Impol's production halls are. There were once the first iron works. But let us take it step by step. Already in the early 17th century, the locals and newcomers built alongside the Bistrica Brook a forge, which was operated by water, and with the help of a water hammer produced iron-forged tools for the needs of the castle and the local farmhouses. The iron was soon supplemented with copper, and iron products were joined by products made of copper, which was accomplished by the Sternberger family. Chroniclers of that time emphasized the year 1825, when the iron works grew into a small industry of copper products. This was the beginning of Impol 190 years ago. But let us turn the clock forward. In the second half of the 19th century, after the expansion of production, the factory employed about 200 workers. Thereafter, until the end of World War I, the program of the Kupferhammer and Messingwerke factory did not expand, and during the war the production came to a halt. In the year 1924, the company was taken over by the Corporation for the Distribution of Metal, Zuckmayer and Gruber from Zagreb. The activity was expanded to rolled products and wires made of copper, brass and bronze. During the Second World War, the occupying power incorporated the factory in its arms machinery, but was not essentially modernized. The partisans wanted to burn down the factory. The attack, however, failed. With the country being liberated, a new era began for the factory. Let us look at several milestones. In 1946, the factory was nationalized, and on December the 31st, the company was registered as Impol, Industry for Metallic Semi-Finished Products. The year 1950 brought the factory self-government and the first ton of semi-finished aluminium products, and thus marked the beginning of the transition to aluminium. 11 years later, when the transition was finished, 13,000 tons of aluminium semi-finished products were produced. At the same time, the long-term renewal of the factory began, so that after the modernization, 21,000 tons of extruded and rolled products were made at the new press shop. With these, Impol paved its way into international markets. In 1968, exports reached nearly half of the total production. This laid the foundation for the future organization of the firm. For decades, its workers kept writing Impol's success story.
Leta 1948, ko sem prišel kot vajenec v Impol.
When I came to Impol in 1948 as an apprentice, the factory worked with copper and cast brass. Different products were made from both. From copper, wires were pulled at first, and later conductors for power lines were knitted. Then Impol had many orders for wires or electrification cables. But because copper was very expensive, we began to work with aluminium. When I started, I was first hired as a semi-skilled worker for a certain time, say 2 months. Then I moved on to the rolling section, and later got a job as a skilled worker in the processing department as a brigadier. Soon I became a foreman, and continued doing that for 24 years. Later, I was promoted to a planner, and then I retired. I worked there for 39 years and a half and saw 9 directors come and go.
Delal sem 39 let in pol, zamenjal sem pa 9 direktorjev.
Our first speaker mentioned executives or directors. Let us begin with Jože Kaukler. He had an interesting career that has always been connected to Impol. He started in 1964 in the rolling mill. 10 years later, he became director and ended up following Impol's development for 6 years as member of the supervisory board.
No, to je bilo pa takrat obdobje izgradnje valjarništva, novega valjarništva v Impolu. In takrat smo potem gradili, oziroma jaz sem...
This was a time of setting up the new rolling mill at Impol. I worked together with experts of our supplier, Westinghouse, and I was a kind of a coordinator for the work with the American engineers. There were 3 of them. One was responsible for the machine hardware, one for high, and the other one for low amperage voltage regulation. I then had a chance to get thoroughly acquainted with the functioning of these heavy, complicated, and expensive machines. It's worth mentioning that when the Americans left, we already installed the first rolling mill without their supervision. The team leading the entire company back then therefore deserves a lot of respect for doing a great job. Furthermore, the purchase of a majority stake of the factory in Sevojno in Serbia could be considered a highly European move. The Impol group, that is Impol in Slovenska Bistrica and in Sevojno, was taken to such a level that nowadays it could be on equal terms with any system of aluminium processing in Europe. This was Jože's short story. In the next few minutes, Čortomir Zadravec will speak about the mark he has left on Impol.
Obdobju mojega direktorovanja, to se pravi od leta 80 do...
During the time of my post between 1980 and 1986, the biggest problem was the organization of a large-scale production. There was a constant lack of resources, which was the main problem back then. We were totally dependent on aluminium, which we got from the factory for hydrated alumina and aluminium in Kidričevo, and on the Russian share of aluminium that we imported as part of the Yugoslav contingent. Buying other metal was simply not possible, even though we were dealing with foreign currencies, because free import was banned for all of Yugoslavia. In the factory, we had much more production capacity than the end result was. In my opinion, we had an installed capacity of nearly 60,000 tons of aluminium products, or a bit more, whereas upon me leaving Impol, the production reached only 45 to 47,000 tons of aluminium products. We continue our journey through the past of Impol by introducing memoirs of Stanko Vehovar. For a decade, he worked in the rolling production. He was co-creator of the modernization of the rolling mill and ended his tenure as head of the development department.
Zavod za izrado novčanica.
In 1972, Belgrade had an institute for the production of money. There was a rolling mill for foils and refined foils and a forge plant. But the law of the National Bank of Yugoslavia did not allow any side production in addition to the production of coins and paper money. Impol's director had connections in different state directorates in Belgrade. So this came out. And we ended up buying the mill relatively cheap in 1972. This was then dismantled, brought to us and rebuilt anew. In 1975, the foil rolling mill was put into operation. In the beginning of July 1975, at Impol's Union Home, the inaugural meeting of the Council of the University of Maribor took place, which was thus founded there. That was a time when everybody was talking about it, when work and common efforts had to be connected with social events. The university was practically established by the working class in the middle of the factory.
To je bil čas, ko je združeno delo, vse posod so rekli, združeno delo mora biti povezano z družbenim dogajanjem. In je univerza, pravim, tudi razmišljam tistem dobu, bila tako ustanovljena v delavski sredini, v tovarni.
We have to mention that Impol has went through some difficult times too. Such was the case in the late 80s, when workers organized a protest and the company went into receivership. I just want to say that we want to work. We want to have enough work, so people can earn enough money to live a decent life. In those days, Adi Žunec came to the company, who was appointed by the Slovenska Bistrica Community Council. The politicians were by no means disinterested in what was happening to the factory that had lived in harmony with the town for decades.
Mi smo vsa leta gradili na tem, da smo si usposabljali.
During all those years, we tried to work on furthering our own staff and securing through schools and faculties experts for the most demanding work. But happiness is fleeting, and it is a matter of people. Precisely people are the ones who will make sure that Impol survives and continues to contribute to the local development. 190 years have deep roots, and they cannot be cut off just like that. It is certainly difficult to build on something that has already been achieved. For successful development, it is necessary to make deep interventions into our expertise by good running, constant commitment, recognition, and stimulation of workers who are willing to work but expect to be paid good in return. These statements close the circle of our speakers who are not part of the team anymore, but had been enriching the company with their knowledge, abilities, and zeal for decades. Before we pass the word on to those who are shaping the company and its development today, let us turn on our time machine again. The early 70s of the previous century were marked by an extensive reconstruction of several production units, which was accomplished despite unfavorable foreign loans and by Impol's own resources. The production line was equipped with a much more modern machine technology. The project was successfully completed in 1975, marking the company's 150th anniversary. In the first phase, the pressing plant was modernized. In the second and third one, it was the rolling mill. In the next 5 years, the production hall for wire products was built, and the equipment for the production of binding elements purchased. An important investment was also made for the building of a profile plant, which allowed a more rational handling of raw material, expansion of the range of products, and better finishing of semi-products. During 81 and 90, 2 quarto rolling mills were put into operation, and the foundry was modernized, enabling better surface and temperature treatment of found products. An interesting fact, in 1988, the highest number of employees in the history of Impol was reached: 2,423 working men and women. In the years from 91 to 95, the pressing program was updated again, thus improving the supplies of press and drawing bars and hoses. During this time, the production program of the rolling mill was restructured so that ribbed sheets and discs could be produced. This brought new clients from Western countries and the United States, where the company Impol Aluminium Corporation was set up. Before the dawn of the new millennium, the employees founded an authorized subsidiary called Impol 2000 Limited. By investing certificates that were handed out as a reprisal for insufficient salaries paid after the breakup of Yugoslavia, the workers became owners. During this development cycle, the year 2002 has to be mentioned, when 70% of shares of the aluminium rolling mill in Sevojno, Serbia were bought, and the company Impol Seval was set up. In this same year, another technological advance in the press shop program was achieved. In the production line of tubes, a 55-ton meganewton press was inaugurated. The next 3 years were also geared toward investments. The construction of the hall for the production of alloys began, and 3 new mills were purchased. 48 million euros were spent for the restructuring of the entire rolling apparatus. All this happened in 2003, when the company, together with Seval, sold 107,000 tons of products. A year later, the most important investment was the modernization of the second foundry line. And in 2005, the third production line was renewed. That year, a 6 microns thin aluminium foil was rolled. This was an important achievement, as it was the thinnest foil ever produced in the company's history. In 2007, Impol was restructured into a larger number of smaller companies, by which means a more efficient management was achieved. Due to the good business results, Jarnej Čokr was again named as chairman of the board of directors.
Ja moram reči, da od teh 190 let obstoja Impola sem že jaz skoraj 42 let v Impolu, torej sem že kar en del.
Out of 190 years of Impol, I've been here for almost 42 years, so I'm sort of part of this history. Impol has always been development-oriented. In the past, too, the company had fortune or misfortune, depends how you look at it. But I think it was a good thing that Impol never had a lot of support from politics. This is why Impol always had to fight alone, in finding new ways out of every crisis. This was also the case in former Yugoslavia. Impol was actually a company that managed to survive on its own, and as such it can survive today. Based on my 42 years spent here, the most difficult time was probably after Slovenia gained independence after 1990, when we lost the whole Yugoslav market, upon which Impol was extremely dependent. After the independence process was complete, the real work began. We had to get a foothold in Western markets, and that was the biggest turn for Impol. The quality had to be increased significantly in order to adapt to Western norms and improve productivity. There was a struggle for survival all the way until 2000, but after that, Impol developed a lot stronger. The company was 3 to 4 times smaller before the independence compared to the years after. The first decade of the new millennium was marked mainly by the remodernization of the rolling mill and the restructuring of ownership. In 2007, Impol Limited bought further 45% of its own shares and was thus, with 97% of shares, the controlling company in the group. During this time, the first extruded products for the new Alumobile program were made, and the new line for painting, built at Impol Seval, was taken online. Additionally, the construction of the solar plant has to be mentioned that replaces a megawatt of spent energy in an environmentally friendly way. But let us return to the people who tailored the fate of the company and set it onto the world map of aluminium production.
Mi smo zmeraj vse, kar smo ustvarili,
vlagali v nadaljnji
Everything we have achieved throughout the years, we have invested in the further development of our company. We never talked about the distribution of profits, but we thought about how we could use the profits in the future for the expansion of our business. In the operating metal industry, every small intervention in the development or production processes can lead to a loss of more than 10 million euros, or even much more. We have estimated that between 1998 and 2006, we have invested nearly 300 million euros in various projects. This means that we have invested much higher sums each year than the revenue of the annual cash flow would have allowed us to do. But through this, we have overcome relatively well the worst years of the crisis, 2009 and 2010, which still hasn't ended yet in fact. The future of our company lies in individual niches. What do I mean by that? We see our niche in the segment of aluminium production, in which we work directly with our clients and thus secure the development of common products. The last 5 years up to the anniversary of Impol were mainly characterized by the increased proportion of products sold for the automotive industry and the completion of investments in additional casting capacities. All this will enable the company to raise production by 15% in the near future and to increase added value per worker. Among the more important investments of this period are the acquisition and the integration of the company Rondal, the modernization of the information infrastructure, and the steady redirection of production to generate more added value. Thus, the company can more successfully compete in foreign markets, where very good results have been achieved. If I look back, I have to go almost to the beginning of my time at Impol, which is 27, almost 28 years back. Back then, Impol was a completely different story. In our industry, it is common to measure quantities, but because aluminium is dependent on the stock market and prices change constantly, so in terms of value, the price can be deceiving, but the amounts have to be fixed, and we have to also plan in advance and fulfill our goals. At that time, we had a production volume of 35,000 tons. Today, we have come to 180,000. Our goal is to reach 190,000 to mark the 190th anniversary this year. When I think back, we had 70% of the Yugoslav market and an export of 25%. The export was mainly for acquisition of foreign currencies, which enabled us to ensure the import of aluminium. We only had a few foreign buyers. The main market was Germany. We actually had only one client who was covering the whole of Germany, and we had only one supplier from abroad. When Slovenia became independent, the entire domestic market completely collapsed, and we had to rely only on export. Surviving that transition with the number of people we had was extremely difficult, but we made it, and here we are today.
Moram reči, da je bila to naporna pot in danes smo prišli tu, kjer smo.
After an eventful 2014, the number 190,000 tons of products could probably be achieved soon, of course, given the conditions on the aluminium global market are positive. Impol's export strategy is characterized mainly by diversification, with products being shipped to over 50 countries, Germany being the biggest buyer. In transatlantic states, the most successful sale is of niche products. Good sales results can also be attributed to the good synergy with Impol's subsidiary Seval in Serbia. Its 95% of production are exported, with the highest proportion to the European Union and Russia. This year is a year of anniversaries, mainly for Impol celebrating 190 years, whereas we are celebrating our 40th anniversary of the factory. In a way, we're also celebrating 13 years of successful privatization. This is not only what we think, but such is also the opinion of the related ministry and the broader Serbian public. that it is one of the most successful examples of privatization in the metal industry. I agree with this, but at the same time, I always like to say or emphasize the fact that we have been bought by Impol, a company from our field, which means that 70% of the Sevojno factory capitalization was bought by someone from the metal industry. People who understand the business game. But at the same time, they have paved our way to markets from which we were cut off because of the war and the sanctions. The people from Impol have brought us new knowledge and their experience. And I can easily say that such a privatization model should be implemented anywhere in the world, because it is a success story.
Treba da se sprovodi u svetu I on može da da uspeh.
The year 2015, when the company is celebrating 190 years of the existence of metal production in the region of Slovenska Bistrica, and when 70 years of activity under the name of Impol 2000 is celebrated, brought a change in the formation of management in the parent company Impol Limited. The train set, which achieved one of the best business results despite many challenges in the past decade, was sent into the future on one track instead of two. The previous members of the managerial board or the engine drivers of the Impol train became members of the board of directors after the restructuring, which is headed by President Jernej Čokl. They were joined by Milan Cerar and the workers' representative Bojan Gril. The managing director is Edvard Slaček.
Danes je Impol prisoten praktično več ali manj na vseh kontinentih tega našega planeta.
Today, Impol is more or less present in all continents of our planet. I have said earlier that a little less than 40,000 tons were produced. Today we are at 184,000 tons. In medium-term strategy, we have written that until 2020, we want to reach at least 220,000 tons. It wasn't always easy, of course, not only because of the environment in which we live and work, but there were also difficulties within the collective itself. We had problems with managing resources and even problems with skilled workers. When I started working, for instance, I was the only metallurgical engineer in the rolling production line. Today it's completely different because we have taken proper steps to build successful teams of management and quality assessment and established strong relationships with our buyers. I can easily say that Impol can stand side by side with all major producers of aluminium in the world. A word or two needs to be said about the financial management of Impol that was quite good in 2014. Out of more than 486 million euros made from sales, a profit of 12.5 million was achieved, which represents a 4% growth in comparison with the previous year. Making sure that everything goes well with finance is Irina Šela, the director of the finance and computer section.
V prvi vrsti je v bistvu naša naloga, torej naloga financ v tem, da
Our job is first and foremost to guarantee that the financial sector can provide the means for the development of the Impol Group and to ensure that the company is solvent. We are contributing to profitability and to the independence of the company's business, and we provide the appropriate capital structure. We prepare information for our management, for external partners, such as banks, suppliers, shareholders, but also for employees, since Impol is constantly under the microscope of all those who are actively involved in the funding of the company's business. These are mainly banks and suppliers. The smallest delays of payments or unfulfilled contracts can weaken the confidence in Impol, thus resulting into catastrophic consequences.
in s tem tudi so lahko posledice kar katastrofalne.
Before we finally stop our time machine marking the 190th anniversary of Impol, let us hear the young workers who got the opportunity to earn their own bread, just like the factory has been doing for thousands of people in the region of Slovenska Bistrica and its surroundings for decades. The company has been living with its local residents also through sports, with its main pride, the local judo club and culture. I've been working at Impol for 8 years now. The factory means a lot to me, because jobs are hard to find in this municipality. The company is the only one that hires full-time, and we are paid on a regular basis compared to other companies. This factory is very important to me because it's really big and known all over the world. I like working here because the colleagues are great, so is the entire staff, and the atmosphere is very relaxed, which is why I'm happy to come to work, and that I think is crucial. The future of the group surely lies in the search for new ways of making products that will continue to be of global quality.
Impol ima velikanske razvojne možnosti v tem.
Impol's development opportunities are still huge. We're currently working on a strategy beyond 2020, which will help Impol make a big step forward. All this with a single goal: to stay in the Western market, which is very competitive.
Seveda, vse to z enim samim ciljem, da se obdrži na zelo konkurenčnem zahodnem trgu.
Thus, the company's doors will always stay open for young experts who will use their ideas and knowledge to upgrade what their predecessors have built in these 190 years.